To our weekly Tuesday webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I'm joined by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSED, Aaron Cochran, Managing Director, Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Today we'll follow again our usual format. I'll share updates from the association. We'll hear updates from David, Susie, and Aaron, then take questions from the Q&A before turning over to New York City DOE questions. Starting off with breaking news, you may have already heard New York City DOE has pushed back its start date to September 21st, for in-person hybrid learning. The mayor and chancellor announced that the first day of the 2020-2021 school year the mayor and chancellor announced that the first day of the 2021 school year will be moved to Wednesday, September 16th. All students will begin remote instruction on that day and be introduced to online learning for the school year. In-person learning in school buildings will begin for blended learning students on Monday, September 21st. Teachers will report to buildings on September 8th, as originally scheduled, and we'll have 6 total citywide professional development days to coordinate, collaborate, and prepare for blended learning. For anyone that is interested, we're dropping a link to the mayor's press conference where this was announced into the chat. Before we move on, I want to ask Aaron if you could share with us what you know about the implications this has for charter schools.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So we understand that this is big news. We did just learn about this today, so we're continuing to work internally to determine the impact on charter schools related to DOE buildings and services.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. We're also excited to announce that in partnership with Credo and the state's authorizers, a collaboration with NWEA to make available nationally normed, baselined, and end-of-year assessments, as well as the opportunity to participate in a best-in-class data analysis project led by Credo. We will be launching this effort formally on Thursday this week during our Thursday Deep Dive webinar at 4 p.m. If you can't join the Thursday webinar, materials will be posted following the webinar, and we will be sharing more information about this opportunity in the coming weeks. But we would encourage all schools to tune in and be on the lookout for additional information that we will provide as an essential resource to school as well as for the New York charter sector to lead the way, yet again, when it comes to supporting students in a data-supported environment. Even if your school already uses NWEA, please join us to learn how schools will be able to participate in an effort by Credo to share future analysis of the great work of New York charter schools. We also have other Thursday deep dive topics planned for the month of September, including a refresher on the Privacy 2D law, which now takes effect on October 1st, as well as insurance considerations in the context of emergency preparedness. For example, did you know that some insurance policies don't cover global pandemics? Check out our website for a list of topics and login information. It's September 1st, and that means the next state aid payments are due to school districts. As we've discussed in past webinars, and has been reported in the media, state aid payments are subject to a 20% reduction by the state. At this point, the cuts should not affect charter tuition payments. The longer the funding gap remains, however, the less likely that may be true. The governor, though, repeated his call for federal aid to fill the state's budget gap, joining with labor unions to send a letter to New York's congressional delegation. We support the call for federal relief aid. Please join us, call, write, tweet, reach out to Congress to urge them to send funding to the states. You, of course, can visit our Fund NY schools to send a letter easily through our website, and we should drop that in the chat as well. All right, Susie, David, Aaron, thanks as always for your time joining us today. I'd like to start off by asking each of you to share an update from your team or your office. Thank you. Susie, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks a bunch, Yamika. Great to see everybody. Happy September. Shocking that it's September. Just wanted to say again, our team has worked their way through most of the plans that our schools graciously provided. Thank you so much with all that you have had to go through, and we're in the process of getting out those acknowledgement letters. There are a few themes and some best practices through those plans that we've identified. And instead of sending out another set of asks or a list of things, or we're planning on a webinar at the end of September. My team, if any of my team is on here and I get this wrong, can you correct me in the chat? But I think we're looking at September 23rd, but we'll give you official notification just to kind of review some of the best practices that we see your colleague schools engaging in, so that you can think about putting those in place later this year. Wanted to also make a reminder to our schools. Most of you have achieved this, but just double check that your Department of Health plan link is on your website, as it is required to be. And then lastly, I just wanted to underscore what Yumika said. I hope everyone can join on Thursday. Sinjin and Jeff from the Mighty Mighty Institute team are going to be running the ball for us on those days. I'll be there, but along with the great folks from Credo who did such great work pro bono for us in the spring in capturing all of the work that all of you put in place. So it's really exciting to know that we're going to be able to continue and leverage. You are indeed the best in class, New York charters, and I'm pretty fired up about that. So that's my update.
All right, thank you. David, we'll move to you.
Great, thank you. And we're excited that so many charter schools, despite the mayor's announcement today, are already providing high quality educational opportunities to kids across the state. I was just learning about the program that Reach Charter School in Buffalo is providing, and it's just, it's really heartening to see that the pandemic doesn't stop our schools to providing these robust experiences. All schools have developed remote learning plans so that they can roll with the punches if buildings are closed, and unfortunately, some of those programs might need to be expanded because of the recent news. But that was the idea around these reopening plans, that they were living, breathing documents, and so. Unfortunately, this academic year, like last, will have a lot of unknowns, and we want our schools to use their extensive autonomy to ensure that they're providing strong programs. I recently sent out some information on health and safety requirements for charter schools, and although we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's imperative that schools that are providing in-person instruction or schools that are providing remote instruction are adhering to those health and safety requirements. And so we know that the pandemic and COVID-19 doesn't prevent fires, doesn't stop other diseases from spreading like measles. And so fire safety inspections still must occur before students can be in buildings. Immunizations must take place before students participate in education programs, including remote education programs, and that's for the greater public health. We don't want to cut off our noses to spite our faces. So there's a lot of information on the memos and guidance that I just sent out. We also, back in June, we surveyed parents from across Board of Regents authorized charter schools, and we received thousands and thousands of responses for parents on how you're implementing your, how they feel remote instruction is being implemented and what supports and services they received. And we're actually going to be sharing the individualized results with Board of Regents authorized charter schools in the coming weeks, and we'll set up a time for us to all chat about it, probably on September 23rd. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, keep up the great work and reach out if we can provide any support or guidance for you.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick update on behalf of Lori. So no major updates from us in terms of our authorizing We're continuing to read your reopening plans and having conversations with schools. We've already heard from some schools that are adjusting their in-person start dates. So just please keep us in the loop as you're having those, as you're making those considerations.
All right, great, thank you. We'll move to our questions. The first question is for SED. SED, there was recently, David released a memo with guidance for billing for SPED students in the 2021 school year. And so while this is primarily a question for SED, if you could each speak to the memo and your recommendations to schools more broadly when it comes to services for special needs students.
Thank you for bringing that up, Yamika. And so we did release some guidance back on the 27th of August, and it's up on our website. So feel free to take a look if you haven't already. It was emailed out to everybody. But the general gist of this guidance is that there's a duty and responsibility for your schools to implement a student's IEP to the greatest extent possible. And that is agnostic to synchronous, asynchronous instruction. However, schools are obligated, as charter schools or schools of the LEA for the purposes of special education, schools are obligated to partner with their CSE to discuss what that looks like, what that implementation, how you operationalize that. Ultimately, it's the responsibility of the district to provide monitoring and oversight over those programs in consultation with their authorizer and the SEA. But we hope that the guidance is helpful for districts in ensuring that that billing for special education students can continue, that in many cases it'll continue as it did pre-pandemic, and that that even if you have services maybe that have been increased, that you can accurately reflect that in your per pupil billing invoices. So we think that it provides a lot of autonomy. It provides a lot of support for districts in continuing those funds. We know that many questions might come out of that, particularly as it relates to, well, what does implementing the IEP to the greatest extent possible mean? We've already received lots of questions about things like ICT, and can you provide that synchronously or asynchronously, or does it have to be synchronous? And those are all questions that you can work out with the LEA, with your districts.
Okay, thank you, David. Susie, do you have thoughts on the memo from SUNY? No. All right. I look forward to your wisdom all the time, Susie, so I'm just disappointed on that. Erin, any comments on behalf of DOE?
Yeah, so just to start, I second what David was saying. And just to add, we are reviewing the guidance and working to issue training as it relates to payment cycle 3.
Thank you. The next question is, how is DOE determining outdoor public space? How is it determined how it's granted for outside learning? And is there guidance for outdoor public space for update schools? I can see everyone thinking. Whoever wants to start, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should, charters should use their autonomy to think outside the box and provide education where they can within the four walls of health and safety regulations and requirements. And so we have lots of schools, even pre-pandemic, that provided instruction outdoors. Brooklyn Urban Garden Charter School comes to mind. They provided some health classes outdoors, outside of gym, not gym, but other classes. And so I see no reason why you can't do that now. Again, within the confines of health and safety requirements. You should also, if it were my school, I would certainly be talking to my insurance carrier to make sure that you have all of the requirements you need just to make sure that the school and the kids are protected. But use your autonomy, think outside the box. And there's also a lot of teachable moments, especially for our schools that have some kind of experiential learning component to them. Like Genesee Community Charter School in Rochester. Learning outdoors outside of the schoolhouse is integral to their academic program in the best of times. So now might be a good opportunity to really build upon that.
I just wanted to also, our team shared this week, we, the state university trustees administer a small pot of funds called the state stimulus funds, and was so happy to receive from all of the schools. They sent us pictures and videos of the work that they were able to complete under the grant. And our friends in Truxton, New York, and again, we're going to give lots of props to Truxton. So if any of you New York City folks want to get out of town and see a beautiful part of the state, Truxton's the place to go. Actually, created a large, and they do a lot of Project Wild and Project Learning Tree instruction. So they created a large kind of pavilion, not enclosed, but roofed in with speakers and screens so that they can do instruction and things outside. So for schools that are not in New York City space, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. And again, if you want to know more about Project Wild and Project Learning Tree, the folks at Truxton are the folks to talk to.
And if I could only just add, they also get an award for the most creative fundraiser in recent times, where they partnered with an old-fashioned drive-in to have a movie night for good kids movies. So if you Truxton folks are listening, I looked up whether or not it was reasonable to drive my kids 2.5 hours in order to participate in it. I think, ruled against it, but kudos.
All right, terrific. Erin, do you want to add anything on that question?
Sure. We have shared out our outdoor learning guidance, and we have also issued a survey to schools that are interested in having outdoor space for some kind of in-person instruction, either a yard or a park or a street. So in terms of the update on that survey, we are in the process of sending out approvals to all of the schools who have indicated that they have access to pre-existing schoolyards and plan to use those yards. The schools in this category of this first round of approvals have not requested any additional outdoor space, so like parks or streets, because that's going to be a more nuanced level of analysis, because it will involve routing traffic and buses and determining impact and things like that. So parks and the Department of Transportation will be sending out the first wave of approvals by this Friday, September 4th.
Okay, thank you. Next question is that we have, as last year, students could be considered present if they submitted an assignment and did not engage with an adult. Is that still the case, or does a student need to have an interaction with an adult in order to be considered present for the day? Are any of your teams planning to release guidance on attendance?
It's yet to be determined whether or not the state education department as a whole will issue additional guidance on attendance. However, we ask that all schools contemplate what their attendance policy would be in a remote environment in their reopening plans. And so schools should stick with that. There's still a lot of autonomy in terms of what counts as being present or not. And so if your school's metric is that you're counting attendance as having completed some body of work, that's your policy. Just make sure that it's applied uniformly, that it's written down, and that it's, especially that common sense is employed when using it. But ultimately, it'll be up to you to defend your attendance policy, particularly as it comes time to bill for the participation of those students in your education program. And I would definitely say that one effective practice, although not the only one, is some type of interaction with the school, whether it be through schoolwork logging on to watch asynchronous learning modules, or some interaction with a teacher would be a good indication that a student is present and participating in your program. But there are many ways to go about doing it.
We talked about this a little bit at SUNY today, and same message we've always given, which is keep really great records. Determine your policy, keep really great records. But I did wonder if the attendance policies for your districts of location would be online and available by those districts. It would be something I might be interested in knowing what my district of location was doing with regard to attendance as well.
Good point.
To add to what Susie was saying, we have shared in a prior C Weekly, as soon as I am done talking, I will post the link in the chat because I cannot multitask, about our attendance policy, if that is helpful for folks.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful.
Are there any updates on whether or not, and I think it sounds like this might be for New York City DOE especially, but I'm going to ask the question, are there any updates as to whether or not schools will be allowed to have after-school programs?
For DOE, we are continuing to work on that guidance.
All right, and then the final question I have, are school vending machines allowed to operate during COVID? And if so, are there certain facilities guidelines to follow regarding sanitation of the vending machines?
I know of no prohibition against vending machines, but I think the best course of action would be to contact your local Department of Health to discuss any potential risk factors. You would need to ensure that students maintain social distancing while using the vending machine, that there's a process and protocol in place for cleaning the vending machine, even between uses. So, it might be more trouble than it's worth, but that would be something that you would need to prepare for and have a process and protocol in place.
Okay, thank you. Susie, Aaron, do you want to add anything to that question? Okay.
Nothing from me.
Okay. With that, Anna, then I'm going to wrap it up and turn it over to you for the Q&A.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to try to hit the statewide considerations first, and then turn it over to the lovely New York City DOE ladies, because it is we know it's a busy day with all of the updates in New York City. So David, there's a question related to the SPED billing, where monitoring and oversight is the responsibility of the LEA, which is the district. Actually, technically the LEA, I'm not sure, Michael, if your question is, the LEA in this case is actually the school, the charter school, and the SEA
for special education purposes.
So maybe take this question, David. So monitoring and oversight is the responsibility of the LEA, aka the district. Does that mean that they will have the final say on funding and reimbursement for special education services?
I could wax poetic about the monitoring and oversight under the IDEA. However, there are federal requirements that are the responsibility of the SEA, the New York State Education Department, to conduct monitoring and oversight for. There are responsibilities then passed down to the district, to the LEA, which is the district in the case of charter schools. But all of us, whether it's the federal government, the state, or your school district, which is the LEA for special ed purposes, are required to follow the law. And so while they cannot make decisions unilaterally, ultimately it's their responsibility to work with the entity above them to figure out how to operationalize those aspects of the law and regulation. Michael, I would say that it is not solely the New York City DOE's determination. They have rules and requirements they need to follow. However, ultimately, you're submitting an invoice to them, and it is their responsibility to ensure that that invoice is accurately reflecting the requirements of IDEA and the student's IEP. You're looking.
All right, so I'm going to keep the. I'm just going to keep the compliance. I'm going to keep the compliance train running. And you know, at the risk of leaving out you other friends with authorizer hats, a couple of questions about the NICETEL, which I know have come up in previous webinars. So can it be administered remotely? And if not, and a school is beginning remotely, what's the expectation for administering it with the typical 20-day timeline in terms of the start to instruction?
Is that for me?
Unless someone else knows the answer to that.
Well, I'll give it a stab. So there is additional flexibility regarding the testing procedures for English language learners. I would say best practice is if you can keep to the timeline as early as possible. That would be ideal. I'd say again that's a best practice. But the L identification timeline has been extended to 30 days for all students, and that even if you cannot make that 30 days because of issues for the pandemic, there is state guidance, and we can share it out. But there is state guidance that students can be considered provisionally identified as being an English language learner. I'm not sure if the New York City DOE's ATS system has a code for that, but in terms of the provision of services and for the purposes of Title III funding, certainly the state ed guidance would apply. And so we can send out some guidance around, or there is existing guidance on that. There was a memo that went out to all charter schools on the 15th of July, and we can reiterate that and send it around.
Great, thanks. So I think there's one last question that's not specific to the New York City DOE co-location, similar New York City specific context. And this question first came through the chat, and I gave my best answer, but I will ask it to everyone with also my sort of current best answer. So if there are two positive cases, I'm assuming separated by days as opposed to two in the same sort of cohort, but there's a deep clean in between the identification of those two, and I'm adding a little bit to the question here. Do you still advise that all schools in that building, even if they're different schools on different days, go fully remote for 2 weeks? So I think that there's a couple things in here, because if students are grouped, cohorted, and those students haven't had any contact, and so I'm sort of asking you all to confirm my understanding that you could shut down those two cohorts for a period of time, as opposed to the entire school, but that if there were multiple cases, either in the same cohort or of students that could have interacted with each other, a deep clean in between their identification, if it's a difference of a day or two, might not address the fact that if those students had been in contact with each other, they had contaminated other students and other students could have come into contact with them, in which case the deep clean in between is not sufficient. Agree, disagree, other context or thoughts about in general cohorts or how students might come into contact with each other?
If I am understanding all of this, it's all very complex. If there's one thing I know all of the leaders and school folks are dealing with is abundance of complexity. My understanding of this is that as the cases are reported to DOH and you work with DOH on the movement of those cohorts and the interactions of those cohorts, they will make with you or for you a determination about cohort closing versus school closing, and help you decide that based on, I would assume, things like contact tracing, but also the rates of spread, if it's 2 weeks apart as opposed to a day apart, et cetera. And that each case is going to be unique, which is why the DOH is deploying, so closely the contact tracers to understand the infection patterns, and then can make a smart decision about which parts of the school close down or whether the whole school needs to close down.
David, Erin, any additional thoughts?
I would agree with what Susie said.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to add that my understanding of any guidance related to if there are 2 cases in the building, in separate classrooms, the concern there is that there is spread in the building itself. And so the closure is preemptive to prevent other spread before symptoms arise. So that is my understanding for that policy or guidance.
I think that makes sense. From what I can see, all of the other questions are related to co-locations, the change in the DOE start date. And so I would hand it over to you, lovely ladies, to speak to New York City specific updates and topics. I know it's been a super busy day.
Thanks, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope it has already been a long day, as I'm sure for most of you. I've heard from lots of you, and I know lots of you have reached out to Erin and Anjali as well. So I just want to, start by prefacing, as I think Erin alluded to, our DOE friends literally learned of the information this morning during the press conference at the same exact moment that we all learned the information. So we are going to ask some questions. I see some questions in the chat. I've been getting questions all day from those of you emailing. So we're going to try and highlight a couple of the big issues, but I just have to say that I know Erin is going to tell you this as well, that some of these things are still being figured out. And I do just want to say that I think it is very important, if you're a New York City Charter still on this call, please, please, please join us on Friday. We sent out the invite a little while ago. I'm putting it in the chat as well, but please come to the call on Friday at 1 p.m. where we'll have DOE and Department of Health again. Just want to put that out there. You can see in the links, not only did the DOH finally release an FAQ that I know a lot of schools are waiting on, but obviously there was a lot of information released today that we will be going through. So with that, I'll start with some of the big ones. Erin, welcome. I know you're filling in for this one. So we all heard September 21st is the first day of in-person schooling for DOE students. Do charters in co-located space also have to delay any in-person schooling for students until September 21st?
That is one of the questions that we are looking into as a result of this information.
Do charter schools in private space have to delay student schooling until September 21st, sorry?
No, they do not, and many of our charter schools in private space are already open in person.
Great. So with that, I think the natural follow-up, I was assuming the answer was no, is are school food and nurses going to still be available to those schools who are, I know some of them are open this week, but even opening in the next few weeks?
Yes, so we are working on school food and nursing services in response to that in-person start date that you provided to us. So there should, if you're a charter in private space, there should be no impact to those services, and please continue to reach out to us if you need more information.
And then I did purposely put busing separately because I think some of the questions are coming in about, will busing services now be delayed into September 21st for all schools?
So we are still working on updates for busing in general, but we are adding that question as we are reviewing what is happening in response to this change of in-person start date.
Got it. And I will just say, because Erin, I know you and I have been on some joint emails together with schools asking this question, can you just remind folks what they should be doing in ATS to review their busing routes for the year? Because I know those have been posted.
Yes, great question. So charter schools should continue to assign bus stops to students and continue, as you enroll new students, continue to request Metro cards for students using the TLST screen in ATS. There is an ATS wiki. It is fabulous with more information there, but definitely reach out if you need more details on that process. So we are asking that schools add students to the stops that are in ATS and to flag any stops that are missing because the stops were generated during an early part in the summer. So you may have been enrolling students since then. And there may be a need for new stops. So please definitely continue that process because all of that groundwork will need to be in place before any busing is possible.
Okay. Going back to co-located schools, next week, the announcement said that UFT DOE staff are still required to report on Tuesday, September 8th. Will that mean that charter schools in co-located space will have the same access to all the DOE schools if they have a DOE site?
That is one of the questions that we are looking into.
Okay. And then I think there was a lot in the plan that talked about testing and testing accessibility. And I know that there's definitely a question on the chat. Are there any updates that you guys have today about information for testing accessibility that schools can share? And I think an added to the question was, is there a DOE template that schools should be using for school employment letters, or can they just create their own?
So no updates on any specific sites, but I'm going to drop a link in the chat that may be useful for folks. This has nearby sites that you can definitely encourage staff or students or families to go to these sites for testing.
I know you got a question earlier about ATS, so I think what this one's a little bit different. I know it was in the context of NISATEL, but if there is there a way for schools to get access to technology that DOE is using to upload transfer data from their attendance tracker to ATS?
So that's a really good question, and I think one clarifying point that I want to make is that the intention, there could be a lot of intentions of recording your daily attendance in ATS. And if you have any other intention than the one that I am going to remark on, please reach out and we can figure out a solution. But if your intention of recording daily attendance in ATS is for the purposes of state reporting, because ultimately that's where that data goes, it feeds into a couple of other reports as well. But the primary path of that data takes is that it goes from ATS to the state. So if that is your primary intention of using ATS to capture daily attendance, I have good news for you because you can accomplish that same goal by reporting your daily attendance to Eastern Suffolk BOCES. You can do it on a daily, weekly, monthly, however long basis. And many of your student information systems will have a button that you can push to generate that template exactly to upload into level 0, which then ultimately will go to the state. So if I know that there are some charters that want to capture their attendance in ATS as sort of another portion of your student information system, we can talk about that. There won't be a function to upload data into ATS that we have with level 0, but I just want to make sure that folks know that if your goal is that state reporting function, we already have that solution in place with Eastern Suffolk BOCES.
Got it. And then I think the last one I had in advance was, are there any DOE school food protocols on cleaning kitchens that have been released?
So nothing new there. The kitchens will be cleaned. I would say if folks have any specific concerns or unique scenarios that you want help working through, please email us at charterschools@schools.nyc.gov.
A question, and now I'm going to move to the chat. A question about charters that are most vulnerable, and the example is given is I think students who are receiving related services. Is there any opportunity for charters who are remotely in session now to have those students receive in-person services, including from DOE related agency providers, prior to September 21st?
That is a good question. If you could, if you are in that particular situation, I think we just need more details about who's going to be in the building or what the plans are. So if you could email charterschools@schools.nyc.gov, we can work through your unique scenario.
I see a question about isolation rooms. This is one we've talked a lot about on the DOH call. So I'll read it and then I'll give my answer because I have an opinion, and Erin, you can agree or disagree. And then Allie will probably bring it to DOH on Friday just to be sure. But the DOH guidance has always been, as I've heard it from New York City, is there has to be one isolation room per building. I think the guidance has been best practices close to the nurse's office. I don't think it was a requirement. And then the school is saying that our co-located principal is told that each school must have their own isolation room. And so, Erin, I don't have any, I do not think that it is a must. I thought it was if you want to have your own isolation room, you can. But Erin, let me know if you have any different thoughts. And Allie, I've already written the question down for Friday.
Yes, sorry, I'm just confirming because I don't want to mix anyone up. Each building must have one isolation room. Other schools in the building can choose to have your own isolation room, but it is not a requirement. And then I think my understanding about the proximity to the nursing space is that you do want it to be close, because in theory, you're having this nurse move from the nursing room to the isolation room, and you don't want them having to take elevators and planes, trains, and automobiles to get to between the isolation room and the nursing room. So I think if in your building, you're looking at a situation where the isolation room is going to be very far from the nursing room, we should flag that, because just in practicality, it may be a problem.
Got it. I see another question related to nursing. I'm going to ask it, but I will just say that I think the understanding I have is different than what you're being told, Mark. So we'll have to bring it up more, or maybe Erin can help flag it if there's an individual issue. But it's a district nurse is stating that a nurse must have a window, and for the isolation room, we are required to provide a staff member an isolation gown, N95 mask, and hospital grade PPE. The head nurse mentioned we could take advantage of ordering PPE from the mayor's office. Are charters eligible for this?
Good question. Oh yeah, sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, go ahead. I was gonna say, I have not heard of this, but that would be great. That was gonna be my answer. Erin?
Yeah, so breaking down a couple of these things. So please, if you're hearing from your district nurse that your space for a nursing room is inadequate, please reach out to charter schools at schools.nyc.gov so that we can look into the situation. Just to manage expectations, if you're thinking about putting a nurse into a closet, that's going to really limit their ability to actually provide nursing services. So we appreciate that there is a desire to make sure that a nursing staff has appropriate facilities, but we want to continue working with you and working with the nursing teams to make sure that we can figure out an appropriate situation. So reach out to charter schools at schools.nyc.gov if you're hearing that, or if you have any concerns related to that. And then I just lost the questions. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think that it was about we've heard very clearly from DOH that the nurses getting all of their materials supplied by the Department of Health. But now if this school is being told they need an actual staff member that is not the nurse, how to get the correct, they're trying to get access to the correct supplies. And the nurse director had mentioned, is there a way to do some buying through the mayor's office?
Got it. So I am not familiar with the mayor's office program, but we can look into that. And then correct, my understanding is that you would need to be providing any staff member that is assigned to an isolation room their PPE to staff that isolation room. So we'll look into this mayor's office program.
And the last question, despite the DOE finally announcing their first day of school, we still don't have a full DOE calendar. So Erin, I'm sure it's top of the list, but we have to say
you
it.
have a calendar, it just has one day on it.
No, you start on that first day and you just count 180 days after that, and that's the
Just
last
go.
day.
So yes, once again, folks, we still don't have a DOE calendar, but we do have one date. We have a date.
Yes, I imagine that any previous calendar plans are now going to be adjusted. So we will be in touch as we know more about the plans for the full calendar.
Great. That is all I see in the chat. I'll hand it back to you, Yomika.
Oh, sorry, just two quick updates, two quick announcements, I'm sorry. So one update on the building response team training. We know many of you were not able to make the trainings last week. So we are sharing two additional trainings, two more days of trainings. We are sharing that in the next hour or so, coming hot to your inbox. Those trainings are happening tomorrow and Thursday. So watch out for those. And then just one more update. So please continue updating your contacts in the Charter Information Portal. Extremely important. This is the contact, the phone numbers, the email addresses that we will be using in the event that we need to coordinate some kind of conversation between your school and Test and Trace or Department of Health. So it's very important that we have updated phone numbers, particularly for your principal, your ED, your ops folks, your COVID-19 liaison, because we want to make sure that you're getting information as quickly as possible. So I cannot hammer that home enough how important that is to update your contacts. All CHIP contacts, all CHIP admin got an email on Monday with your login. So if you have no idea who at your charter is your CHIP admin, please reach out to charterdata@schools.nyc.gov and we will get you set up. And that is my last update.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining us for our Tuesday webinar. We will see you again on Thursday. I want to just give a heads up that look out for your emails. You'll see an email regarding the New York Charter School Association virtual conference that's coming up this year in October. Check your inboxes for the email. We hope that you register that and in the meantime, until Thursday, when we talk about NWEA and see these folks again, be well. Bye.